Thank you very much. And we talked about the last day and a half, this morning and yesterday, about response, preparedness, risks, and now we're going to talk about cost recovery. So before I talk about what the fund does, what the funds do, just a bit of background and context. There are a number of IMO conventions that cover marine pollution damage liabilities. There is, of course, the persistent oil as cargo. There is a convention. Thank you. Okay. There is the convention, the Bunkers Convention that was mentioned yesterday that covers oil as fuel. There is a convention for liability caused by damage by wrecks. And then there is a convention that covers the chemicals. Again, the risk for chemicals were talked about yesterday. And this convention will cover liability for those risks, risk of carriage of chemicals by ship. The convention is not in force yet, but there are a number of states who have already ratified and acceded to it. There are more states that are ratifying and acceding as we speak, but they're working on it. And just to quote ITOF on the shameless plug, there's going to be a workshop at the end of October at the IMO, organized by Canada in cooperation with the fund and IMO, to which all member states of the IMO and IOPC funds are invited, which will talk about issues of implementation, ratification, so it might be of interest for some participants here. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about, as I said, is persistent oil. The risk or the pollution damage caused by oil transported by tanker is covered by 3 conventions of the IMO. These 3 conventions are layered, so there are 3 of them. The first one covers liabilities by the ship owners, and it's the Civil Liability Convention that David Baker will talk about more details later. And then there is the Fund Convention that covers additional liability on top of what the ship owner pays and is financed by oil importers. And then there's Supplementary Fund Convention that provides an additional layer of compensation. The conventions, all 3 conventions work, as I said, they work together. So they provide compensations to victims of pollution damage caused by spill of persistent oil by tanker. So it's only crude oil and persistent oils carried by sea, and they apply to the territorial waters and exclusive economic zone of the member states. Now, this map that you see here is the membership of the conventions. The countries in gold are countries which are parties to the 3 conventions, CLC, Fund, and Supplementary Fund. The countries in dark green are parties to the Civil Liability Convention and the Fund, the 92 Fund, and the ones in dark gray is CLC only. Altogether, it's quite a number of states. The 92 Fund has 121 member states, for instance. Now, the way the regime works is fairly simple. It's based on the sharing of compensation costs between all the sectors that deal with transport of oil by sea. So it's the ship owners and the importers of oil in the member states. So they both will pay compensation at different level, the ship owners, civil liability, the owners, the fund convention. Other basic principle is that because it's an international convention, all member states, all the states ratify the convention are supposed to apply the convention in the same way. So the same regime applies everywhere. And if you come by our stand in the exhibition room, we have a claims manual, which explains how we look at claims, how we assess claims, and all the claims are assessed the same way in whichever country you are. And the last one is also important. All claimants are treated equally. We give the same attention to small claims and large claims. All of them have been assessed. And if there is not enough money to pay everybody their established claim, all claimants will receive a percentage of their assessed amount. So nobody's going to be left behind. The way the regime works, as I say, is in layers. The first tier is covered by the Civil Liability Convention. The source of compensation is the ship owner, which pays an insurance premium to the insurers, and the insurers, the P&I Club, will pay compensation to the claimants directly. The second tier, the second level, is the Fund Convention. The source of the compensation is the importers of oil in the country, but the importers of oil in the country do not pay directly the claimants. they pay a levy, a contribution to the fund, which is an intergovernmental organization, and it will be the fund that pays compensation to claimants. And the third tier works exactly the same way as the second tier. You cannot access the funds of the second tier unless you have already extinguished the funds on the first tier, and the same with the third tier. So they work on top of each other. The first tier civil liability convention, as I said, David Baker will talk quite a bit about it, so I'll just very briefly just give you some comments. The first one is that it's based on strict liability, so the owner will pay compensation whether there is fault or not, in exchange so that the owner can limit liability based on the tonnage, and to make sure that there is money, they have to have insurance. And like I said, because they have insurance, the claimant can go directly to the insurer rather than going to the ship owner. There are very few exceptions to liability, and the owner cannot limit liability only in the case that the damage is basically caused by him. I just want to talk a bit more about the fund convention, obviously, because I'm part of the secretariat, so it's more my field. But basically, the fund convention pays compensation based on the paid by the contributors in the member states through the intergovernmental organization, and we only pay compensation when the civil liability limit has been exhausted. So if there's not enough money available under insurance, then we come in. So to be a member of the fund, you have to be a party to the civil liability convention. You cannot have one without the other. We pay a maximum per incident of about $268 million US. It's 203 million SDR. The contribution you can see in this graph is based on how much oil is imported in each country. And currently, India is the first country per contribution. You're receiving a lot of oil, so 15% of the cost of each incident will be paid by Indian contributors. On the other hand, if you have an incident in India, 85% of the cost of the incident will be paid by somebody else. That's how mutual work. There are some exceptions to payment, so we have some but they're even more limited than the Civil Liability Convention. Basically, the fund will pay if, in any case, except whether the damage is caused by an act of war or has been damage caused by a warship, or if the claimants cannot prove that the pollution comes from a ship, so from a tanker. A ship as defined in the convention, so a tanker, not any ship. And very briefly, the supplementary fund, as I said, works exactly like the 92 fund. The contribution comes from importers in the member states. It pays compensation when the limit of the fund has been reached. You can only be a member of the supplementary fund if you are a member of the 92 fund. And the maximum compensation available is, at current exchange rates, about $980 million US. That includes also the fund and the CRC limit. So it's all together, the three conventions will give you that amount. As you can see, the contributing oil is a bit different in the supplementary fund. The supplementary fund has currently 31 member states, 32, and the biggest contributors are the one in Japan. So Japan is the biggest contributor for the supplementary fund. So like I said, these are the limits. So the Civil Liability Convention goes from $8 million US to about $118 million US, depending on the tonnage of the ship. When that limit is reached, then the fund kicks in, and that is up to $268 million per incident. And when that limit is reached, then there is a supplementary fund. Now, what would this mean in this region? Well, if we look at how the conventions are ratified in this country, the Civil Liability and Fund Convention are India is a member, obviously, of the 92 Fund Convention, and so is Cambodia, Malaysia, the Maldives, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. Indonesia, Myanmar, and Pakistan are only parties to the 92 CLC, and Bangladesh is not party to any of the conventions. In practical terms, what it means is if you have an incident, say, between Pakistan and India, the two countries, the victims of the claimants in the two countries will have to share whatever is available under the Civil Liability Convention. But only India will have access to the money under the supplementary fund. So in the case of an incident, there will be more money available for India than for Pakistan. On the other side, again, if you have an incident with Bangladesh will have access to nothing. So they have to ratify the convention to have access to the compensation. No country in this region has access to the supplementary fund, so if you have an incident in which the damages exceed the fund convention, there's no way to avail yourselves of the supplementary fund amount, and every claimant will have to have a smaller proportion of their claim. Because like I said, every claimant will be paid some, may not be everything, but will pay some. In terms of what we pay, because I keep talking about compensation, but what it is that we're talking about is basically any loss or damage caused by the contamination. Normally, in our history, we had claims for cleanup measures, for preventive measures, property damage. If a fisherman has the nets damaged by the oil, the cost may be recoverable. Economic losses, fishery sector, tourism sector, and cost for reinstatement of the environment. Environmental damage is covered by the convention, but it's a much more limited scope than what you might have seen in other, in certain national legislations. So it's only cost for actual measures to recover the environment. And just to go very quickly to the end, the funds have been around since 1978. We dealt with over 150 incidents. It was 2 different funds before, but we are working to provide compensation to victims. Because we are intergovernmental organizations, we do not have any interest in cutting on the claims, but we want to make sure that we treat all the claims equally. So we make sure that all the claims are assessed properly, and it's been fairly successful so far, because if you can see we have paid compensation for about $1 billion, $900 billion for all these incidents. And that was a very quick panoramic of how the funds work. I hope it was interesting. And I'm done. So.
Thank you, Dalamaya.
Oil Spill India 2022 is dedicated to the Honorable Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and Clean Seas.